Okay, Willard and Dibs, glad you're with us. 888-957-9570 if you want to weigh in. So here's the thing from Brandon Aiyuk. And this sort of, I think, at initial glance, it made everyone uncomfortable. The reason being is that Aiyuk was in the doghouse with Kyle Shanahan last year. And then he's clearly out of it, and he's playing great. He's having a great camp. And then you get to this, and I think most 49er fans are like, ooh, God, wait, is this going to upset Shanahan? So end of practice yesterday, joint practice with Minnesota, as you know. And then Aiyuk gets to the podium, and here's what comes next.
It was good work. It was good work, going against somebody different, in a different environment. But I ain't like it too. I feel like it was a waste of time personally, but it was boring for sure.
Okay, and then the reporters kind of followed up. They were like, well, that's why we were asking. And some of them were like, yeah, we thought it was boring too.
Cam Inman, actually.
So, what was your...
For calling him Scam Inman.
What was your first thought when you heard that? Because I was like, great honesty.
Yeah.
But my first thought was, ooh, is Kyle going to like that? I don't know if Kyle's going to like that. Great honesty, but I don't know. A little uncomfortable.
Not at all to me.
No?
No, my thought was your thought. You're right. No, you're right. Shout out Ross Tucker. But he is right. It is a little bit boring. So you go out there and... First of all, he didn't get a lot of balls thrown his way. It's a joint practice. You're not running anything other than the absolute most vanilla offensive plays. You don't want to show Minnesota. You don't want to put anything on film. So really, you're going through these motions for what? So that maybe the 2s and the 3s can get some reps. You can't go full speed because it's not real football. So basically... You're just going through the motions. And Aiyuk knows he's not going to play on Saturday. And I would imagine Trey Lance won't play. Debo won't play. Kittle won't play. Trent Williams probably won't play. McGlinchey won't play. So what are we even doing here with these joint practices? Training camp is too long. And although Alex Boone said, their camp used to be 6 weeks and you had double days and all that, those days are gone. The CBA has made it so you have to limit the padded practices. You've cut down one preseason game, so there's 3 preseason games. A lot of these guys won't play in any of them. Aaron Rodgers hasn't played in the preseason in 5 years or more. So what are we really doing? Brandon Aiyuk said exactly what almost all these guys want to say, which is, this is pointless and this is boring.
Well, I think he touched the ball very, very rarely during this process, and that is it for, you're a player that we want to bubble wrap now, Brandon. I think this is part of this message also.
Right.
We don't want you out there running around. Trey Lance is not expected to play in the game tomorrow, and I'm totally behind that, which is something we can get to in a minute as well. Are you even in on this preseason game? Do you even want to watch this game if Trey Lance is not going to play? Because if he's not going to play, that's not the 49ers out there tomorrow. There's battles that Kyle will be watching. Not just our Kyle, actual Shanahan. He'll be watching. And yes, they're going to make decisions based on some of those battles. But how deep of a dive do you want to do as a fan? We're like, I need to check out what's going on. Third string, linebacker. Come on. If Trey's not playing, this isn't the Niners. And the Rams have not played a real preseason game in a couple years now. They don't play anybody. That wasn't the Packers last week. There was no Aaron Rodgers. So I get where he's coming from that perspective. But here's what then kicked this for me to some level of concern. So Brad Graham, who runs at the SF Niners, was on with Bonte and Joe this morning. And he's been out there following the Niners and watching every single thing in camp. And they asked him what was his translation of what Aiyuk said, and here's what Brad said.
My perception of what Brandon Aiyuk was saying was more like, there wasn't a whole lot of work getting done because the defense on the Vikings side was making it pretty difficult for the 49ers to really get into a rhythm and do those types of things. That was my takeaway from Brandon Aiyuk's comments because it did feel like the O-line was struggling a little bit.
Okay.
That's his takeaway?
Yeah.
And I don't think he's wrong.
So then all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, Brandon's bored. He's bored because the offense can't move the ball. And we've spent the last 2 weeks of camp going, oh, well, the offense didn't look great. But remember, it's because they're going against that great 49er defense in camp. And so this will look better when you go against a different defense. Now, I'm not saying the Vikings defense is trash by any stretch, but how many defenses are you going to go against where you're not moving the ball? And, but that's the Vikings defense, so we're not moving the ball. Now, I get it. Trent Williams not doing a whole lot. The offensive line will be better week one than it is in camp. I just think you got to be careful, with this. Every defense we're going against is great, so that's why they're not moving the ball. And secondly, you got to be able to move the ball against good defenses if you want to win in this league.
You do, but I'll go back to my previous comment, which is most of what they're running is vanilla. You're not showing a lot of the Shanahan pre-snap eye candy like Alex Boone talked about earlier in the show. All of the motions, the pre-snap movement, the shifting, a lot of that stuff you're not doing in these joint practices. You're running pretty standard vanilla football. Now, the other piece of it, which Mr. Graham spoke to, is your offensive line against their defense, you're losing. So if you're Brandon Aiyuk, even if you wanted to work on your routes and getting open, Trey Lance is on the run, and so he's not able to sit back there, and you're not really able to run the offense you want to run because your offensive line is getting pillaged a little bit. So part of that, to me, is troubling in his assessment of what Brandon Aiyuk said. But again, until we get into real live football action, I'm not going to hold too much of this too seriously.
Well, I'm with you, and I do believe we've fallen into an era, and there's nothing anybody could do about this. But it's TMI, but not for the reason that we usually use that phrase. There's too much information out there right now. Football didn't used to be this like, oh my gosh, here's what happened on this play, here's what happened on that play in August. I mean, we've got so much video, so much information, so much interest. This all comes from a great place. Comes from the place of like, my gosh, we love football. We cannot wait for it to get here. And especially when you've got a player like Trey Lance, who has been a big-time name for a year and a half in this city, and we've watched him a sum total of basically 2 times. He has started 2 football games, been a huge name in this town for a year and a half, and we don't get to see him. So we're very, very, very excited to watch this new era of 49er football start. But it's TMI. There's too much information that A, we're getting, and that B, they're not really giving. In other words, to your point, if this is going to go to a vanilla spot, they like these joint practices. Kyle said that they're more productive than the actual games, but are they? In what way? If you're just going vanilla because you don't want to show another team anything, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what Brandon was speaking to.
Yeah, I think what you're getting out of it from Kyle Shanahan's standpoint, number one, a greatly decreased injury risk. Now, I know that it was getting a little chippy and some guys were tackling harder than they were supposed to. The injury risk is lessened, and I think the other part of it is you get maybe a better look at the 2s and the 3s on your roster, and both teams are able to do it in a controlled way. It's a controlled setting, whereas a preseason game where there's odds and over-unders and there's a crowd and all the rest of it, it's not as controlled. So I think he likes the injury decrease, the ability to look at 2s and 3s, and also the controlled environment nature. But if you're a player, especially if you're one of the ones, you're Brandon Aiyuk. You know you're not in the doghouse anymore. You know you're a starter. You're champing at the bit to get out there and start your quest for 100 catches and 1,500 yards.